Was race direction as good as we thought they were? Were the stewards as apt as they were supposed to be? That's what we're going to discuss on the Mexican City GP review of the Inside Line F1 podcast. And what a phenomenal race, which started out with drivers going four wide at turn number one, with Lando Norris building up a huge margin, with Liam Lawson nearly taking off a Marshall at turn number one, with so many crazy battles and Max Verstappen going on the off strategy and eventually recovering to get a wonderful podium. And also, Oliver Behrman taking Haas back to the top four after 7 years. What a race that was. But why, Kunal? Why are we starting off this episode with race direction? Is it down to the fact that Liam Lawson nearly took out two marshals at turn number one who were crossing the road and were not supposed to be there during the double wave yellows?
Well. Were they not supposed to be there? Was Liam Lawson not supposed to be there? What actually happened? And I think there was a lot of intense furor on social media, in the media, as well in general media covering the sport because it was very unsafe. Imagine a Formula One driver actually going on the radio saying, "I could have killed that guy." And I had shivers down my spine when I saw it. And typical of Formula One, they of course did not show these replays on the world feed, right? But social media being social media had this going, and this is probably the most viral clip from the race. Not Lando Norris's win, not Max Verstappen's consistent second stint, not the chaos at turn one, but it was this particular incident. And I thought we should address it as people who've commentated on this event live, who in general have a voice in the world of motorsport with the audiences as well. I just thought it was scary. I just thought it was unfair to those marshals, unfair to Liam Lawson, unfair to the fans if something would have happened. So I really hope FI gets to the bottom of this, because the last time something like this happened, guys, was when Pierre Gasly couldn't see the tractor in challenging conditions in Suzuka, and then they changed it to say recovery vehicle on track. That's what goes on the race control dashboard. I want to know what happened there and what is the FI going to go do next to make the sport safer and the drivers and the marshals, everyone included.
And it was a very weird circumstance, Sundaram, because Liam Lawson was off the cycle, which meant that he pit when everyone else was following the normal race leader's line, because he, of course, had damage. And the marshals didn't quite expect him. But the FIA recognized that. They sent an order asking the marshals to go back. And something happened. There was a breakdown in communication, and that order was not quite followed, which is very dangerous. Like in the world of motorsport, that's criminal sin number one. So I'm glad that number one, the FI are addressing it. But wow, that got really close. And that's not even the last of the race directions talking points on this weekend.
No, I think it is the most important one because that's one that really talks about safety, especially if we have volunteers, marshals, human lives at risk. That is, of course, the most important topic. And quite clearly, there was some level of miscommunication, something not going according to plan, because the very simple fact is that whenever you have marshals on track, you do always get the VSC or the safety car. So the fact that there were two marshals who crossed the track, went on to the greens to take or lift the debris, and no VSC being called, it itself goes to show that something was not right in terms of what race direction wanted and what was actually panning out on track. And like you correctly said, the expectation was probably that Liam Lawson follows the rest of the pack. They all pass that section, and then the marshals go out. But then Liam Lawson going into the pit probably meant that something had to be called off. So some miscommunication that has to be cleared over there, and quite clearly the information that they were not there was not given. Like I said, VSC would have been called, but it's happened a couple of times. Kunal mentioned the Pierre Gasly event in Suzuka. I very distinctly remember the Nick DeVries event in Monza a couple of years ago when there was the tractor on track uh, taking a car off the track, and the racing was on. So there have been many close calls, and it's good that no one's hurt, but the FI really needs to tighten the screws on these sort of incidents.
And it just so happened to all happen at turn number one. We knew this, Kunal. We knew this. In our preview, we said turn number one is going to be the action zone. So the Lawson incident with the marshals was one. Also, the drivers going four wide. Verstappen then cutting across the track along with Kimi Antonelli at lap number one as well. And then immediately after turn one, on the run to four, we saw Lewis Hamilton getting pushed wide, or rather taking the escape route, getting on the grass, not getting enough traction to get it back, and then getting a 10-second penalty for that. How do you view all the drama that happened there, which I think can be summed up at Lewis's message, which is how do we stop people taking advantage of turn one? How do you do that, Kunal, when turn one is such an action zone?
Well, you can't really stop them. You put grass, and you have rules in the race director's notes, which Max Verstappen followed. So if I generalize the whole turn one chaos, firstly, I loved it. I loved every second of it. I loved how Lando Norris was up to the challenge. I loved how both the Ferraris were there. I loved how Max was like, that's it, I got to make that move, even if I'm going curb riding. So I loved how everybody played their part there. Charles Leclerc after the race said, I hated every meter of turn one. And you can imagine the kind of stress they would go through as a driver. We've already got messages coming in. Was Hamilton's penalty fair? What's the criteria for a penalty to be fair? We'll get to that because that's where the conversation leads us. But to me, I think, Paracet should have been the sponsor of turn one, lap one, turn four, paracetamol, right? Because it would have been I could sense that it was a headache for race control. By the time I started getting those messages on,
Nice one. Nice one. Nice one.
by the time I
Nice
started
one.
getting messages on the race control dashboard, turn one noted, turn four noted. After a point, I'm like, can you tell me which incident was that? Because for me, it was damn confusing, even though we were live calling the race on fan code Soumil. That, yeah, we saw those incidents, but which one of those incidents are you actually, letting go? Are you investigating? Are you whatever? So to me, it was fantastic. I love that the drivers challenged the stewards for once in real time, giving it back, so to say.
And I think you'll
I
always have these sort of tracks where on some tracks it's a lot more easier for the stewards. You have gravel traps and everything takes care of itself. But then certain layouts, these sort of incidents or these sort of situations where drivers push the rule book to that extent to see if am I really at fault or not. That really happens, and I think that's fun. Actually, it's a nice little mixed bag of situations that might happen. Some days the stewards are overworked, some days it's not the case. But then it really puts a lot of question marks on racing itself. Was Charles Leclerc supposed to receive a penalty? A lot of that is kind of falls into a gray area, but it is what it is, unfortunately.
Let's jump into that. Let's do it because everything else is answered, right? Or rather, there is an answer to it, which we will come to. Why was Leclerc not penalized? Why did he go off track when he did? Turns one and two of opening lap after the start, right? Because he was close to hitting Lando Norris. He was, of course, on the outside, dirty, everything else that we know. But he did not give the place back to Lewis, right? Because Lewis was ahead at the apex ish between turns one and two. If we were to just slow down those onboards, I would say. And crucially, why did Ferrari not tell Leclerc to give the position back? So Leclerc didn't give it back, nor did he discuss it. Ferrari didn't discuss it or tell him to give it back. And then the FIA did not even sort of note the incident or investigate it. Any clues, guys, that came up on social media?
Not that I found anything about that, because quite clearly, I mean, I did look at the onboards, and at that at the apex, Leclerc was slightly ahead of Hamilton. So according to the rule book, you would say that Leclerc was supposed to be given space, and he went off track. And the fact is, Leclerc did have the space to come back, and he did have the time to come back. But if he done that, he would have definitely fallen behind Hamilton. So he took the easy route of cutting across the grass and then keeping that position, and giving at least one position back to, who was it, Norris, and he didn't
Yeah.
give it to
Yeah.
Lewis. So see, that's the exact situation where drivers really try and push or exploit this situation. They say, you know what, I was ahead of him at the apex. My front tire was in front of his mirror, so I do get that position, or I do get to battle for it. And they're really pushing it in that sense, and I think that's why he didn't get penalized for it. Teams should have, and they didn't as well.
Team,
Honestly,
Go on, go on.
Go ahead, go ahead.
When you say team should have, I must remind you the last couple of races when Lewis has had post race penalties. Ricardo Adami, Lewis's race engineer, has announced the penalty before the FIA stewards have officially done that. Okay. So Ferrari should have just told him, give the place back to Lewis. Because when we consider Lewis's complaint, what was his complaint about? His complaint was about Leclerc, right? Because, who else went off? Max went off, and Max sort of let Lewis by at that point, right? So Lewis was basically saying what happened to those guys who went off at turn one and cheated. I think he also used that word on the radio, and he was blatantly talking of Leclerc. And I also believe maybe this was payback from Baku. I don't know, but that sounds silly, right? Because Baku was a different scenario. Here, Leclerc was clearly off the track. So, anyway, the point is Ferrari should have intervened, at least in my mind.
And I think teams, at least at the very beginning, when the race is beginning, they have to be a little bit more cautious about this, because the fact that if you do receive a time penalty, you have to serve that in the pit stop, and then you tend to lose out more time than you would otherwise do if it was probably a penalty that was copped in the latter half, because then you're able to kind of extend the gap to those 5 or 10 seconds and still make ground from that. But when it's at the start, I think teams ideally should be a little bit more cautious then in that regard.
Yes, in which case we have to go to the comments, because yes, we've spoken of Leclerc, but people are willing to know, was Lewis Hamilton's penalty fair? And what is the criteria for a penalty to be fair? And this is where I'm going to ask a very key question. Do you guys accurately remember what all was Lewis noted for, investigated for, exonerated for, and then penalized for? I like Soumil's nod.
I have no clue, my friend. I lost count. I lost count because after a point during the race, I was like, do I care more about Oliver Behrman's lap times, or do I care more about the five things that Lewis is getting invested? Let that happen. They will sort itself out. Let me focus on if Behrman can actually hold on to that position, which happened. So my attention was in the right direction. But no, to answer your question, and that's Sarika's question. What's the criteria for a penalty to be fair? I think fairness is subjective. It's all gray. What's fair to you is not fair to me. And the only thing we can really focus on in this case is it legal or is it not? And by the rule book, Max Verstappen was perfect. He was ahead at the apex. Lewis Hamilton did go off the track. He did not take the escape road. He missed it and he gained a position. And so, by the rule book, he should get a penalty. It's just what it is.
You're
It's
saying
a
he,
separate.
he,
It's a
he
separate
should,
story. It's a
he should or he shouldn't? What did you just
He
say?
should. He should. Like
Max should get the penalty
No, Lewis
for going
got
off
the penalty.
track.
Yeah,
For going,
of course.
Lewis got, that's the fun part.
Yeah.
My reading is that, so you're talking of turn one when Max overtook Lewis.
No,
right?
no. Turn 4.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. Turn
Yeah,
four,
yeah.
there were two reasons which we discussed on the broadcast. First was Lewis was supposed to use the race director's notes and join back on that little tarmac, which he said the grip was so low, which is fair because if, only when you're in the racing car and racing conditions, if the tarmac can be reached or not, right? The second part was by the time he, sort of realized he's ahead of Verstappen fell behind Oliver Behrman. Now, the right thing here, unfortunately for Lewis and Ferrari, should have been to give both those positions back to neutralize his
Yeah.
off-track advantage. They didn't talk about it. Lewis didn't talk about it. And maybe Lewis was like, everyone's anyway cutting the grass and making a position, so why single me out? So Lewis was also probably fair in it. But that's that. So I think in general, the FIA was stretched, race direction was stretched, but they were pretty fair. And I would say that even Max Verstappen was very fair in following all the rules. I mean, he
Yeah.
is one of those people who will literally give you a headache when it comes to adjudicating such situations. But I believe he was very hard, but also very fair in following all the procedures around him, because he clearly is the one doing all the catch up.
Yeah, I think he's not giving you a headache. I think he's being the clearest person possible because he did what he was supposed to do: place the car ahead at the apex, and then get the other driver to make all. Like now it's a different story that the grass is very slippery and there's not enough traction and it's a very sharp turn, and then it's some might argue physically impossible to get a Formula One car back onto the escape road, which you should take at turn number 4. But Max did what he had to. The only thing that's going on in my head, though, Sundaram, is what is this rubbish discussion we're having? Just place gravel traps. Racing should not be about whether like did he cut the corner and Just place gravel traps. The race on the track or don't race at all. What are we talking about here?
I'm definitely a fan of gravel traps, more than tarmac or runoffs. I get it in certain situations, considering especially turn one. It's such a long dash to turn one. You really need to keep some level of leeway in terms of what's there. It shouldn't really cause so much of deceleration by that at such a quick rate that it leads to a safety issue. So I get why gravel traps are not there at the start of turn one, but then I thought it should probably be at the end of the grass. But then that would literally spray the gravel onto the track, and that would eventually lead to a safety car. But that's what it is. And see, the fact is that a lot of these drivers, Mexico for example, is such a beautiful track to show you how well the rule book, the drivers really know it. And Max is one of the smartest drivers. He exactly knows at this apex, I'm ahead of these drivers, so I'm entitled to room. And many of the drivers or many of the instances you'll see, if a driver's cutting a corner, he asks his race engineer, should I have to give that position back? And probably that conversation never happened between Lewis and his race engineer. But that's what really happens. It's a true test of knowing the rule book and exploiting it to the maximum.
So cool. That was incredible to see. Max was just so good at that. And his drive at the end was phenomenal. We should get to that in a second. But comments, we need to take comments. And we want to take comments because all of you have been so actively engaging with us, even at this godforsaken hour, honestly. It's 1:08 on a Monday night. You guys shouldn't be here, but you are. But that's what we love about it.
That's just an IST. With the majority of audiences coming in from Europe, this is 8:30 in the evening or
Oh no, no,
night.
no! The world revolves around India, my friend. No, no, that old European notion that the center of the world, no, no, it doesn't work. It's the world revolves around India. It's late. Everyone's staying up late for us. That's how I'm going to look at it. But the comment that I really want to move on to is what Sabi FPS 33 has put up. And I think that is really something we should talk about. He says, I think McLaren really sabotages Oscar's car. I'm going to flip it around. I'm going to say Lando Norris really delivered on a weekend where it mattered a lot. Like our title for this episode is the real Lando Norris back? What we saw Sundaram this weekend has to be Lando's strongest performance all season, given the context, given the situation, given the lack of grip available, given the competition, given the streak that Max is on, given the importance of scoring points. It's only fair that he got the win and now finds himself at the top of the World Championship by 1 point.
Yeah, and it was a statement drive. I'd probably equate this win to probably his win in Australia, wet conditions. He was constantly being pressurized by Oscar through the race and difficult circumstances. But what that race did not have was the pressure of the championship. And the interesting thing that we're talking about Lando Norris is, a couple of days ago, I put up a poll on my social media and I asked who's winning this year's title. And majority of the people said Max, who was in third, or Oscar Piastri, who was leading the championship. Everyone conveniently forgot the man in the middle and the person who had a bigger chance of catching up to Oscar. So the person who had been forgotten had to come back and make a statement drive, and he did that straight away in qualifying. So on the final run, putting a time that is literally four tenths quicker than anyone else in itself puts you in a very good position for the race win. And as we have seen throughout the season, if you put your car on pole, I think majority of the work is done. All you really need to do is ensure that you lead the first lap, and then you have free air till the end of it. So Lando, in the context of the championship, like you rightly said, and looking at how many mistakes he had been making in the first half, it's about time that we saw or we received such a performance from Lando. So very well done from him this weekend.
And actually, I'll just add one point, that it was not just from qualifying; it was all the way from FP2. He had 60
Yeah.
minutes less in the car. He was on
Yeah.
the pace, and Lando shared a couple of good insights. He said after Singapore, when he wasn't able to qualify as well, he sat down with the team, and he told them a direction he doesn't want that car to go. So, given the whole context of championship positions between Verstappen and Piastri, all the pressure and everything, for Lando to pull off what I would call a Verstappen-esque race win was pretty timely. He finally leads the Drivers' World Championship, even if it is by 1 point, after giving it up in April this year after the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. And he wins it on merit. He wins it on style. He was on a Saturday drive while everybody else was, sort of chasing things down. And, a couple of comments which I'm going to put up. Brood Insights is saying Verstappen's race pace was incredible. Lando was definitely more in sync with the car. Red Bull still looks seriously competitive. Do you think McLaren can pull it together? And this is where it goes back to what we spoke in the preview, right? That I believe Red Bull is still the quickest car, right? But it's all down to characteristics of the circuit. It's all down to temperature, all down to circuit, all down to even altitude. And I believe for McLaren, Andrea Stella made a very interesting comment post race. He said it was important for us to showcase that we are still the fastest car in Formula One, right? As the constructors champions, they don't want to be out developed. They don't want to be in a position where they're like, wait a minute, it's just not our car that's the quickest anymore. So I believe it was fantastic. I think it's great for the drivers' championship. Even though Lando's leading, Verstappen has now gotten 4 points closer to the McLaren drivers, which for us is brilliant, right? As fans of the sport. But we will take the comment about sabotaging Oscar's car, because what is happening to Oscar Piastri, right? And Oscar himself, for once, explained it. He's saying, I'm having to drive the car extremely differently in these low grip circuits. Andrea Stella said he's still learning how to tackle these low grip circuits. And I hope that, with low grip circuits hopefully out of the way, Piastri is able to come back into the, back into the, but I don't believe there's sabotage.
There is
Definitely
Las Vegas coming up, and that is the mother of all low grip circuits. There is no grip. It's a no grip circuit instead of a low grip circuit. Which is where we should bring up Sadhna's comment. Sadhna asks, was it the car? Was it the circuit? Was it the strategy? Was it them papaya rules? Was it the teammates' bad day? I think it was a combination of all of it, because circuit characteristics don't just influence a car, they also influence a driver, as Kunal pointed out. Because Andrea Stella said after qualifying, Lando's the kind of driver who's great at low grip scenarios, where he'll be able to get on green, green, green sectors. Oscar is able to extract the maximum from high grip and use his talent there. Paraphrasing, but that's what he said, which is a fascinating piece of insight about their driving styles. Now, I'm not qualified enough to do an exact analysis as to what they're doing and what movements in their car lead to this being the consequence of it. But it's an interesting trend. And if it is indeed a trend that goes along, Sundaram, Las Vegas is going to be a tricky race for Oscar, which means that he's got to get a lot more from Brazil, from Qatar, and from Abu Dhabi.
And the fact is that he doesn't have a good record at any of those circuits apart from Qatar. So Oscar Piastri actually doesn't have a good record in the next set of rounds, be it Interlagos, be it Las Vegas, Abu Dhabi. He's never stood on the podium. So in the next set of rounds, the only race where he's taken the podium is in Qatar, P2 and a P3. But I've read Stella's comment on this, and the fact that it kind of baffles me to some extent. I get why he's talking about low grip, and it's understandable around a track like Mexico, which is not used throughout the year. But even in the first half of the year, we've had several circuits that are low grip, and how has Piastri managed to do well around that is something that kind of baffles me. But it's probably a combination of factors, probably the title pressure getting to him, and a lot of rumors recently. Maybe it's kind of unsettled him, the way how even Baku went. But whatever it is, he really needs to pull up his socks and come back all guns blazing in Brazil, because otherwise this title is slipping away from Oscar.
I'm going to bring up Uttara's comment. She's saying McLaren should be penalized for asking Lando Norris for advice on which strategy is better for the other side. I actually loved that radio message. We should discuss radio messages at some point from the race, because there were so many of them. There were such long ones. But that was teamwork. That was papaya rules helping Oscar Piastri for once, I would say. And before we forget, Exoteric is here. He's saying, just love the show. Please keep it up. Best, funnest analysis. Pod on Formula One. I love that. But okay, any more comments on Piastri, on Norris, and or do we just celebrate Norris's win and the fact that there is a new leader in the drivers' championship, even if it is by 1 point?
No, I think we honestly need to talk about other things, because there's so much to dissect. Like what Brood Insights has said, Leclerc deserves a shout out for doing what he's doing out of that Ferrari, which is valid. But let's not forget, it's also a Ferrari circuit. Like Mexico City has, in the last couple of years, been a good circuit for Ferrari. Now, whether that's down to cooling, whether that's down to their power unit performing well under high altitude, whether that's just down to the car generally being good at managing the low grip, it's a combination of factors. But last few years, they have been doing well here. And you've got to admit, Leclerc's racecraft was on point and he was able to pull it out. But Max Verstappen, I think that is the bigger talking point here. Like to go on such a brave strategy call, to be able to be, wasn't he behind Hamilton, Behrman, and the entire lot there, Kunal? Like I think he was what, eighth at some point?
Quiz time. Do you guys think Max Verstappen could have taken second place from Charles Leclerc if it wasn't for the VSC? Soumil.
Yes, I think so. You could see the difference in the car. Did you notice, Sundaram? Like just the way Max's car was able to attack all the corners. And after a point, I thought after lap 25 on the soft, I thought, nah, no chance. Like no chance. Beyond this point, he's not going to be able to maintain this rhythm and this momentum. But he kept on going. He didn't
and
stop.
and and that's a Max masterclass. We tend to see that if you see the lap times as well, that's going viral on social media. The guy is ultra consistent, and I think that's one of the most fascinating things about him. If his race engineer gives him a specific lap time, the guy is always on point. And that's also essential in a race like this, where there's very little graining, there's very little tire wear. You really have to kind of reduce your gap to the car ahead by being on point with every single lap. And we've seen several drivers falter at this juncture, but Max is definitely not one of those. So he really made a race out of that because of his consistency. Could he have overtaken Charles if not for the VSC? I'm a little sold by Charles's racecraft, especially after Austin. So I'll say maybe Charles barely hangs on to it.
Yeah, I get a feeling as well. I mean, in Austin, what happened was Norris did overtake Leclerc at the end of it, right?
Yeah.
So, I believe it's one thing to get close enough. It's another thing to actually make the overtake. We saw the likes of Piastri take extremely long to overtake George Russell. Of course, McLaren is not as fast as the Mercedes on the straights and so on. But I get a feeling he would have probably run out of the narrative would have been two more laps and Max would have been second had we not had the VSC in the end. But again, talking of that VSC, I'm glad that the FI got out the VSC because there was a situation where the assumption was that Carlos Sainz's car was on fire. So in these cases, acting more safe or acting in a safer manner is more important than just focusing on the entertainment.
Yeah.
Krishna is here. Sorry to disappoint you. I was waiting for the live to start yesterday. It never did, but I was waiting for analysis anyway.
That's on me, man. Sorry, that's on me. Like I was dead. Like I was able to carry on the adrenaline till 3:30, 3:45
In the morning,
after
India time.
in
You
the
need
in
to
the morning
spend.
India time after like a whole day of broadcasting Supercross. But then I did also text on the group like guys, let's go recording. But then in a second it crashed. And I was like, nah, no chance. So we're here. We're here. Like we still soldier on. But I love
J-
the
J-
fact that you're here, Krishna.
yeah,
Thank you.
it's great, and I love that people are waiting for the live analysis. And I must say,
Exactly.
Somil, you're not going to say it, so I'm going to say it for you. You had three broadcasts yesterday. You had the Indian Supercross League, then you were on Fan Code, and you were also going to be on Inside Line, and then you just realized at 3:30 in the morning we can take the Inside Line the next day because we know that fans also tune in on the Monday from all around the world. So I'm glad you waited, Krishna. Thank you for that.
I mean, I could have done Inside Line yesterday had I not been called at 10 o'clock in the morning for a race that was about to begin at 6 p.m. in the evening. So those 4 hours in the heat that I spent there, I think that got to me in the end. But you're here, and that matters. Thank you, my friend. I love that.
Yes. I
More,
have to say one thing before we move on from did we just move on from Norris? I can't remember.
yeah.
Okay, I have to ask you. Remember Norris used to struggle with the starts. He used to get outgunned. He used to have slow. He used to have wheel spin. Yesterday, one of the starts we have to mention something that is usually not a strength of his or is a weakness of his. Okay, he actually converted into a strength. So what did he do? He had a great launch. He realized he will get slipstreamed into turn one by Lewis Hamilton. So he backed off and he bunched the whole
It was
gang
very
up.
good.
And I think that's, of course, he is an intelligent driver, but for him to be able to pull off, for him to have worked on this weakness and made into a strength, which eventually got him that race win. Because what was everyone saying? Norris might not even lead after the end of lap one, but guess what? He did.
Yeah, and it's a little interesting. I've been looking at social media today as well. For some reason, there's this whole legion of fans who don't really like Lando Norris. So I kind of understand why the negative perceptions are turning up around him. To be honest, I think Lando's still not perfected all of his starts. We've seen him kind of fumble from the very front as well. But yesterday was brilliant execution right until the end.
It really was. Ganesh has a question.
Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, Ganesh's question is: do you think everyone played it safe at turn number one? Had any of the top five taken a risk of a lunge at turn one at the start, maybe they could have held Norris for the win. Any of the top five? I think they did, my friend. I think they really did. I think everyone did. Everyone played their part, as Kunal said.
But were they safe, or were you think they do you think they were aggressive, Soumil?
Four wide into turn one. Can it be more aggressive than that? Is my only question.
Exactly. I think they were very aggressive, and I think just to point out what Ganesha said, where was that lunge? The reason why that lunge couldn't come into turn one from anyone is because Lando Norris was controlling how the pack was going to chase him down. And did you guys actually hear the boos in Mexico for Lando Norris?
Were there
Yeah,
boos?
Yeah, there were boos
there were boos.
on the podium. So apparently, one of the Mexican media outlets ran a poll on on Lando and Oscar, and they said they were booing for Lando because a lot of people thought Lando should give 3 points back to Oscar for the papaya rules in Monza. Okay. And poor Lando, he was asked this question in the post race press conference. And I was like, okay, that's actually very bold because usually you never corner drivers in such scenarios, that happen on track. But okay, we should move on. What else have we got? Because we've spoken Lando, we've spoken Oscar, we've
Behrman, Oliver Behrman,
go for
Sarika.
it.
Sarika has the comment of the day. Behrman deserves a shout out for what he is pulling out of a Haas. Guys, 7 years since Haas have been in the top four, over 150 odd races. Oliver Behrman has done it. He's gotten, and he's in fact taken Haas to their fourth double points of the season. This is such an incredible performance. And let's not lie, Sundaram. We were all waiting for him to get past. Like we were all waiting for that one moment where, sure, someone will finally outpace him and someone will finally pass him. But that moment never came. This guy, I think, has this performance actually has to be more impressive than Hajar at the Netherlands or Antonelli in Australia or the likes, because that composure, in spite of being attacked by so many greats, kudos.
And yeah, putting yourself in the top four when you have drivers like Lewis Hamilton, Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, literally all surrounding you, deserves kudos. So I think Oliver Behrman had a brilliant weekend through and through, especially in qualifying. Put the car in Q3. I think he's had a string of Q3s, three Q3s in a row, and this is how Formula One is as well. Often you'll have a kerfuffle at the front and you'll have to make the best of that scenario. Try and put the car in that place where you don't damage it and then manage to get a P3 or a P4. That's something which George Russell tends to do a lot. But he managed himself from there on. He was remaining in the podium positions until he had to cover off who was it, George Russell, for the second time. If not for that, Oliver was very surely standing on the podium. I had all my podium stats ready for him just in case if he had taken a P3. It did not happen. But to talk about Oliver Behrman's talent, I think we all noticed that when he filled in for Carlos Sainz in Saudi Arabia. He already pulled a P7 or P6 last year. And he quite clearly has been one of the talents that was looking forward to this year, apart from Gabby Bortoleto. And I know he's had a little bit of a slump in between this season, but he's coming off incredibly well this season. I think he has 32 points here. He has more points than his more experienced teammate Esteban Ocon. And one other fact which I want to talk about is that pit stop. When Oliver was running in P3 or P4, it was important that Haas have a good pit stop. They pulled off their best ever pit stop in the last 3 years. No one spoke about it on the feed, but 2.33 seconds was their quickest pit stop in the last 3 years, and possibly all time in Formula One. I don't have the data to validate that, but even on that front, Haas did a spectacular job under pressure.
And I will commend the other rookie, Bortoletto, for pulling off what he did, because Sauber was actually facing power unit issues throughout the race. In fact, that's the reason why Nico Hulkenberg had a DNF. But Gabriel Bortoletto made his strategy work, pulled off those overtakes, and scored another point. Of course, the next race in Brazil is his home race as well, his first ever home race that's going to come. But quick comments that we'll take. Shitman 343. I don't know what that means. Is that Kimi Raikkonen? Okay,
It's
but
as Hitman.
S-Man.
have we discussed Max and Charles were on the podium because of cutting corners on first lap?
Yes.
Yes, we have.
Yes, we have.
But we have to commend. Okay, question: do you think Max Verstappen was very bold or very bold into turn one, or do you think
He was just Max. He was just Max.
Is there any other driver who can do what he did into turn one on the curbs? No. On the medium tire.
No, no. Yeah, that deserves a shout out. On the medium tire, in an 800-meter run down to turn one, Max Verstappen backed himself to be able to be as good as the other drivers on a tire that has such a big grip drop off. That is, I don't know if that's confidence, if that's guts, that's arrogance, whatever you label it as, Sundaram. That is crazy. Like that, Max was Max,
Yeah,
says Brood Insights.
and he managed to keep it out of the barriers because, like I said, he was on the mediums compared to everyone else's soft. So it does take a little bit more time to heat up and warm up. Despite that, he came very close to the barriers, and like I said, he probably knows that I can probably get away with probably locking up my tires because I know there's a vast runoff area which I can use as well, and that's what even a lot of drivers know. They can take these sort of risks at tracks like this and see where it takes them. If the others had a little bit of a bad start, say Leclerc or Hamilton, you would have seen Max Verstappen trying a pass on the outside, but didn't happen this time.
But Max, I don't think he locked his tires up. I
No,
think
he
what
didn't.
he didn't. He knew that, oh, I don't need to lock up. I'll just use the race director's notes, which I've sort of memorized before the race. And what he went over the curb, he brought on dirt onto the circuit, which eventually got Oscar Piastri to lose a couple of positions on the turn one of the opening lap as well. But that was Max. Max was being Max. What if Max Verstappen actually started on the soft tire? The soft tire was the main tire for the race. What if Max actually started on that soft? Do you believe he would have been able to get P2 a lot more easily? Because he would have been up there with the Ferraris, chasing and attacking them rather than defending them. What do you guys think?
What do you think, Somal?
I love the silence.
Honestly, I want to think more of George Russell. Like,
No, wait. No,
it's,
no, no.
like, if I'm being very
Jo-
honest.
Max Verstappen thought that he was surprised everyone else was not on the medium, right? So he was thinking, Red Bull was thinking everyone's going to start on the medium. But imagine they ran the offset tire strategy through the race. I just have a feeling he would have been easy second if it just followed that, because they would have been on the prime tire
Yeah.
for a longer part of the race. Of course, it's could have, would have, should have.
Agar magar ki
But-
dagar is what we like to call it in Hindi.
Yes.
If you know, you know.
Okay, now we can go to George Russell, your other favorite driver after Carlos Sainz. And since
Yeah.
Sainz didn't really do much in the end. Okay, George Russell. Are we talking of his radio rants?
We have to, which made sense, by the way. Like as an enjoyer of drivers getting the best resources, I was very annoyed to see Mercedes take so much time to let George Russell pass Kimi Antonelli, who was evidently 2 seconds slower than George. Sorry, 2 tenths slower than George. My apologies. While being in clean air. So imagine how much more time George could have taken off. Maybe he wouldn't have been passed by Oscar Piastri. Maybe he would have delayed him for even longer. I don't know. Maybe the whatever agar magar ki dagar, as we like to call it. But it is a little annoying to see that take so long. But the banter, Sundaram, the banter. This guy's a stand-up comic while driving at 300 kph.
I absolutely love George Russell's radio messages. It's not just in this situation. He gives us a couple of these radio gold moments through every season. But his frustration was very valid. If he felt that he was quicker and if he had the tires to support him, he could have had a go at Oliver Behrman. And it probably takes me to the larger picture at Mercedes. Is George Russell really considered that number one driver? Is he really considered as the one that really have to protect and support? Because for some reason, I try putting Max Verstappen into that car, and I say that he would never have to be in a situation where he has to literally have to tell his team, I need my teammate out of the way because I need to have a shot at P3. So the number of times he's had to convince his teammate, his race engineer, to let Antonelli pass felt like he doesn't get the credit that he deserves, is what I feel.
He doesn't get the credit, yes, but I have the alternate view to you guys. I think by letting George through, they exposed Antonelli, and then Antonelli had the bad pit stop. And hence, Kimi Antonelli post race was very livid. He said we could have actually had P4 in the race today. So George Russell was sort of protecting Antonelli. And if they were anyway going to finish in the positions that they did, because they didn't have the overall pace because of the conditions, and I mean, it was a warmer, right? And what happens to Mercedes when it's warm? We all know that, right? So I get a feeling they could have just protected Antonelli, and maybe that could have changed the course of the race. But anyway, so that was that. And
But didn't
then
Kimi have a long pit stop? He had a
he had
pretty
the
long pit stop.
he had a long pit stop, yes, but he was eventually told, okay, you're on your own, because he was
Yeah.
he was let to be attacked upon by other people. But anyway, where do we go to? We are going to Brazil. We're going to McLaren. Can McLaren continue? That was one of the comments that came up earlier on in the show itself. What do you guys think? Can McLaren pull it together? They have pulled it together in Mexico. What do you guys anticipate could happen at Interlagos in Brazil?
I think the track
McLaren.
decides, right? The track decides. It's Interlagos. The circuit picks its winner.
And the
That's a
winner is?
The circuit will find out. The circuit will tell you. Like, tell me a Brazilian GP where you have walked in knowing who's going to win the race, and that exact person has won.
No, that's the case with Formula One these days as well. You're able to kind of assess who this track kind of suits, but then eventually when you turn up with the track conditions and you have no understanding of grip, even you get a better understanding of race pace and tire deg only on race day. So you can't really kind of predict that beforehand. But in my view, I think McLaren will be quick around Interlagos and around Abu Dhabi, Red Bull in Qatar, and maybe Mercedes in Vegas. That's what I think.
So, what do you think is happening in Brazil? Because Brazil has, of course, three sectors. Sectors 1 and 3 are low drag stuff, which is what the Red Bulls would love. Sector 2 is actually the high downforce stuff, all the twisty Mickey Mouse sections. What do you think could happen there? Because now I'm
Verstappen
very
pole.
Verstappen pole. Who's
Yeah.
taking sprint pole?
Oh.
Sprint pole was Verstappen. I'm not doubting anyone else for a sprint. Sprint Max wins from pole.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the race Lando takes it.
You think so? Do you know that pole you ran? I'm yet to meet a Formula One fan who does not believe that Oscar Piastri is going to bounce back.
Oh,
Right?
I'm going purely on momentum. I have belief in Lando Norris that he's going to take this momentum into Interlagos rather than fall off. So that's clearly where my answer comes from.
I get a feeling McLaren is not going to be the quickest car at Interlagos. I think Red Bull is going to be back, and it's like Soumil said, Interlagos chooses the winner, but Max also knows what's it like to sort of dominate when the car is right there, and I get a feeling Mercedes is going to be in it. I get a feeling even Ferrari is going to be in it. So it's no longer what we were thinking that 1, 2, 3 could be jumbled positions between Max, Lando, and Oscar. I have a feeling there will be other drivers in the mix. So this drivers' championship battle is still wide open with the 4 Grand Prix and 2 sprints remaining.
Unfair of you, Kunal, not to mention Haas when they are one of the last five teams to get a pole position here. Unfair of you to do so. That's
Yes.
wrong. Especially after they've gotten their car in the top four. That's unfair. Okay, Sarika says, I'm skipping Brazil. Let's go to Las Vegas and Sainz will be on the podium. Please don't skip Brazil. It'll be a great race. And please don't skip the preview of the Brazilian GP on the Inside Line F1 podcast too. And how can you make sure you don't skip it? By pressing the subscribe button and the bell notification. Very 2015 of me to say that. But yes, press the bell notification. That's how you'll be able to tell when we go live next. And Ganesh says, if it's a wet race, it's going to be Max. But yeah,
since
that's where we are.
since since the main question is, and I know Uttara's pinging saying, guys, what is the main question, right? Do you guys think Lando Norris is actually back? Let's do a yes or no.
Yes.
Did he ever leave?
Briefly before the summer break. I think he's back after the summer break.
If that's the case, yeah, he's back.
My theory is Norris is more comfortable when Max Verstappen is suddenly picking up the pace. When it's Oscar Piastri picking up the pace, he's like, no, I still got to sort out that McLaren. So with Max Verstappen being one of the quickest drivers, Lando Norris is woken up, and he's going to have that momentum for the next few races. I get a feeling as well.
Should be fun. And you'll be with us on that journey, guys. Of course, you will be. As I said, you can subscribe to us on all the short form, for all the short form content on YouTube and Instagram at Inside Line F1 Podcast. We'll be back with more Brazil preview, Brazil review, lots of feature content in the middle as well. When we go live, you can join us and share your comments, as so many of you have done today. Ganesh, Uttara, Brood Insights, Sarika has been here, Sabi has been here, Exoteric, S Hitman, Krishna. Love that. Love that at this late hour, you guys are with us sharing your insights and your opinions on the race. That's why we do it, guys. That's why we do it. So the fact that you're here makes it so special. Okay, now we should say goodbye. We'll catch you guys shortly. Good night and enjoy the racing. Bye bye.